To install the Stage 2 kit for the Elite Alpha Trooper, you will need your kit, your blaster, a small Phillips head, and a small flathead screwdriver. So first you will need the bolt sled, breech, and pin. So I'm going to set the blaster aside. Okay, to install the breech to the bolt sled, hold it in place and insert the pin. The fit in the bolt sled is looser, so you should be able to get it in most of the way without too much trouble, but it will hold onto the breech very tightly. So you need to make sure that all three holes are lined up, and the way I like to do it is to push outward on the bolt sled here to prevent it from collapsing when you insert the pin. And you're going to want to take a hard object. It could be the flat part of a pair of pliers, anything really, and you're going to drive the pin through the holes while supporting the bolt sled with your fingers here, like this. And it has to be almost, you won't get it 100% flush without countersinking it, but just so it's not sticking out. So when you run your finger over it here, you don't feel it protruding much. If it's sticking out too far, it could interfere with priming. Next, you want to install the O-rings onto the plunger and the breech. And then apply a light coat of grease to each. You don't need too much grease because the inside of the plunger tube is already greased from the factory. So you just want to put enough on there to coat the O-ring. And wipe away any excess. All right, so we're going to set that aside and open up the shell. First, you need to remove all of the screws, which I've already done to save time, and then remove the back cap and the pump handle, or the priming grip, and then split your shell. If it sticks, use the small flathead screwdriver to pry around the seam. I need to apologize in advance that this is not a stock Alpha Trooper. This particular blaster has had its locks removed and has some prototype parts in it. So let me get this set up real quick. So basically, the first thing you want to do is remove the plunger, trigger catch, and bolt sled. And be careful not to lose the trigger catch spring. I'm going to set the shell aside and disassemble the breech and bolt sled, or the priming rod from the bolt sled. You'll notice here I do not have the stock bolt sled screw. It had been stripped just through multiple disassemblies. So what I have here is a shell screw that's been cut down and a hardware store washer. So with the priming handle, or the metal priming rod removed, you can take your Stage 2 bolt sled and install it onto the priming handle. If you still have your stock screw, be very careful when screwing it in. It's pretty easy to strip, and if it does strip and you can't get it in all the way, you'll have to use the washer method shown here. Make sure that's good and tight. There'll be a tiny bit of play back and forth, but it shouldn't move side to side. It should be held in place. Next, take your shell, remove this front section and the chamber. Be very careful not to lose the spring that operates the dart tooth, or you won't be able to load. So we'll set the breech in, matching up these side rails to this rail, and make sure it lies flat. Just like that. Move it to the rear. Hold down your dart tooth and reinstall the chamber. Double check this spring. Be very sure that this spring is in place and not hanging out halfway. If that happens, you'll, instead of darts being loaded into the breech, they'll just be pushed into the barrel. Okay, from here, slide your grip back into place. Move the bolt sled forward till it engages the chamber. And this notch will lock onto the bolt sled and hold it in place. Like that. That'll just keep things tidy and prevent them from moving while you're installing the rest of the parts. We'll go ahead and put the heat shield back on. We're going to take our plunger and plunger rod and separate the two. The easiest way I found to do that is to just brace it with your thumb and pull it out. Then take the Orange ModWorks plunger with the greased O-ring and install it. Now notice right here, you can see that the O-ring is bulging out. That's going to happen just about every time you do this. So to correctly install it and to get the most performance out of this, take your thumb, push down on the bulge, and then rock it into place. Just like that. Now, take your plunger, slide it over the back of the breech, and press these tabs into their rail. Just like that. Make sure everything is lined up in the rails, and then double check this part right here, the trigger connector. The hook should be in front of the bolt sled. If it's behind the bolt sled, you won't be able to prime your blaster and you'll have to take it all the way apart. And then double check that to make sure that this spring is in place. There we go. Now you can take your trigger catch with the trigger catch spring and install it just like you did with the Stage 1 kit. Make sure everything's in place. Okay, from here, make sure the dart door, the jam door is in place. And now we can install the trigger. Remove this screw. Take out your trigger. Get your trigger spring and install it, and then pop it back into place. All right, at this point, give everything a once over to make sure it's in place. Make sure nothing is impeding the movement of the bolt sled. Relock it to the front. Oh, make sure that doesn't happen. All right, and from here, go ahead and close the shell. Do not force it closed. You can see that right now mine's not closing. That's just because the bolt sled rails are not lined up between the two halves. There we go. So if you just move the bolt sled slightly, they'll usually pop right into place. Move everything forward, take your spring and insert it through the back of the blaster. From this point, go put your screws back in, reinstall the back cap, and once you've done that, give it a test prime. And I'm not going to prime it all the way because I don't want to dry fire, but just make sure everything can move. Double checking to make sure everything moves will save you a lot of time in case something is out of place, so you won't have to take out all your screws. So from here, just put the screws back in and give it some test fires, and in the next video we'll take it to the crony. Hey guys, just a quick note, to keep your kit running more smoothly and to keep your Alpha Trooper running more smoothly, and to remove the and to give yourself the ability to deprime your blaster, I would go ahead and remove this lock. And to do that, remove the trigger connector, unscrew this silver screw, and pop the lock out. This will let you prime at any time, and that way if you don't want to fire your blaster to get the last, or if you don't have a dart in your blaster and you want to fire it, let's say after removing the magazine, you can pull the pump grip back, then pull the trigger, and then slowly let it forward. All right, that's it. Thanks for watching.